Hello and welcome to our career interview with Miss Rebecca Zack. Joining me today for this interview is Greenville student Jaden Burke. So Ms. Zack, we will start if you can tell us what is your profession and a little bit about the journey that you've taken to get to where you are today.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and appreciate the opportunity to talk about what I do, and hopefully it'll inspire others to get involved in government. So my title is I am the Assistant Commissioner for Intergovernmental and Community Affairs at the New York City Department of Transportation. And sorry, what was the next thing?
What was your journey to where you are today?
So when I got out of college, I started working for a state senator in Albany, and that gave me a tremendous amount of experience of what it's like to work for an elected official. And then when I moved to New York City, I started working at the Department of Transportation, and I worked in their budget office. I managed funding that the agency gets from elected officials. So I already had developed an ear and a sense for how elected officials like to be approached and how to speak to their offices and to elected officials, period. Especially when you're trying to encourage them to fund something that the agency is trying to achieve. Hopefully you have shared priorities. And then, through that job, the budget job, I moved up to the government affairs office, and I was the director of that for a little while. And then in 2017, I became the assistant commissioner.
So in your current position, what does a typical day look like? And that might be different currently than pre-COVID, but what does a day look like?
I hope I can, this is the only prop I have, but I keep a running list of everything that I have to track. A lot of my day is following up on inquiries that I've gotten through City Hall or through elected officials asking, what's the latest with this? What's an update on that? But it's also trying to forward and advance goals that the agency and the city is trying to do. So we were trying to present projects, present new concepts to elected officials, to community boards all over the city on things that we want to achieve that make everything safer, more equitable, and you're also, trying to advance the goals of an administration. So and I manage staff too, so it's making sure that they're staying top of the things that they need to stay on top of, and I'm staying on top of all the things that I need to stay on top of. It's a lot of follow up.
What do you love most about your job?
I love when we get to the point where we actually get to do the work. We've presented the project, and in like any community, New York City is like any community, a lot of people have opinions, and transportation is one of those topics that is becoming, and we're not the MTA, just to be clear, we don't run trains. It's kind of everything that's above ground. So we have bus lanes and bike lanes, and we do tons of street improvement projects that increase safety. We're from in every borough and every neighborhood. There's 59 community boards in New York City, and we're presenting at almost every single one of them throughout the cycle of the year. So it's you might go and present like, oh, here's this great project we want to do, and then you get an enormous amount of resistance because people don't love change, and they don't want to, they want a lot of people like their neighborhoods to stay the same. And we have a job to explain the benefits of a project and how it will make, a place safer for everybody. So I love most when we get to the point of actually doing it, because some projects are very hard to start, but I understand that too.
What kind of skills do you use in your career? So this could be like communication.
I do, it's funny because in college I was an English major, so I did, obviously a ton of reading and writing, but, I think being able, being able to email, obviously, like constantly. I have, a lot of devices that I have eyes on all the time. I think being able to, I know I said it before, but follow up is, a lot of times people think if you're not asking about it, the problem has gone away. And I'm very good at reminding people that problems don't go away, and I will continue to follow up with you. Um, but the ability to kind of share like maybe less than favorable news to somebody in a way that makes them feel like they've been heard and that we're not discounting whatever their concerns are. And also reminding my staff of all the things that we need to stay on top of too.
So you've kind of touched on this already, but what are some challenges that you face in your position?
I think when we have a lot of widespread resistance to, especially like a very big project and just kind of chipping away at what those issues are and trying to solve them. There was a couple years ago, there's a train that runs between Brooklyn and Manhattan. It's called the L train, and that's run by the MTA. And they were going to need to shut down, and it runs, I want to say it was like 150,000 people a day. That one train line alone was the like fourth busiest train in the country, even busier than all of San Francisco's BART system, just one train line. So it was going to have an enormous impact, and it went through, a large swath of Manhattan and through Brooklyn. So jointly with the MTA, we were going out with a very complicated project of how we were going to try to alleviate this. All these people coming above ground, you're going to need buses, you're going to need more pedestrian space. And, it was an incredibly intense period of doing a ton of community meetings, open houses, having some really, heated, spirited debate with people. And, we, at the end of the day, that the train line didn't need to be closed down fully because they thought we were going to close it down for 15 months, but they did a partial closure, and it turned out to be fine. But you never know that when you're starting that, and you just can. I'd say one thing that is a challenge for me is just not seeing the bigger picture sometimes. It's just being very focused on what the immediate problem is and trying to solve that instead of, I'm always just trying to get to the next thing to try and get us closer to the end goal, which is, doing what we propose to do. But I have to say, almost every project is made better by community feedback. I mean, it's vital that anyone who's going out to talk about some things that could be very disruptive, are really listening. And I think, we do a very good job of that.
So what advice do you have for a student that's like interested in the profession?
I would say that I would say the most invaluable experience that you can have is actually working for an elected official. And one good thing is that you do not live, you probably have local elected officials that you could intern for, but also Albany is not that far, and they have, you have the capital of the state there. And it is, I worked there for 9 years and 1 month, and it's just, there's an incredible amount of work that's happening in those buildings. And for 6 months of the year when session is in, New York politics is never, ever boring. So I would say, if you have an opportunity to do an internship or maybe talk to a local elected official that you might know and want to participate doing some constituent services in their office, I think they're always looking for bright people to do that. And, if it leads to like working in Albany or any other city or state or municipality, I think, I think also knowing the type of things that you're interested in to see in your community and things that you want to achieve, and trying to align yourself with an office that has like shared goals. You want to be working for someone that you believe in some of the things that they believe in.
I know you mentioned that English helped you in high school, but were there other classes that did get you where you are today?
That cut out a little bit. Could you ask me one more time?
I know you mentioned English helped you a lot in high school, but were there any other classes that you took in high school that helped you?
In high school, that's a really long time ago for me, so it's hard for me to remember. I graduated 30 years ago for this class of 91 at Colony High, so it's hard for me to remember. I'd say one thing that I think that school creates, like high school and specifically college, is what I learned most in that is kind of like how to organize and work through a priority. Like, what is the thing that you absolutely need to achieve in a day, and then kind of work down from there. And I don't always do this, but I try to do this, is the thing that, you know, is the hardest to do or gives me the most amount of stress. Try to have that be the first thing I do. So I think more than any class, I would say the organization of just that process of being in school and having to be organized enough to get through it. There's, I mean, one class that comes to mind that kind of gave me a different perspective, and it has almost nothing to do with my job, is I took, there was a professor at University of Albany called Professor Slade, and he taught poetry. And I took those classes, and I think of those sometimes just because of thinking of a different perspective, of looking through a different lens. I don't always have to be, um, of how, I don't always have to be thinking in terms of so black and white. And I don't know, it's more about how he was a professor and less about maybe what we read, um, but just trying to see things from the other side. And I learned that in that class.
Good advice as well.
Yeah.
So I have one follow-up question, because I think in your position, you're obviously trying to meet the demands of many different facets, right? People pulling from different directions with different viewpoints. And I think something that's important for kids to hear about is the idea of conflict, and how do you deal with situations where you have one group wanting one thing, another group wanting something else, an elected official wanting something else, the department trying to work on something. So what's your approach, or what would your advice be for that type of kind of conflict or problem solving?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is coming to the table. And I've worked for people who said, being willing to listen. And I think sometimes even when people don't get exactly what they wanted out of something, if they feel like you heard them and that you're willing to keep listening to them, and to keep getting their feedback. And if we do something that's really not working, we want to fix that. So I would say, like, a willingness to always be open to to continuing the conversation and always having the conversation. At a certain point, what we find a lot of times with projects that have maybe an enormous amount of resistance is that sometimes once they're in and people adjust, people are okay. But we want to do what we can to make people feel like they've been heard as much as they can be as well. So not no one, I think, ever gets like exactly everything they want. I think you have to show a willingness to compromise, and so does the other side of the table. So I think that's something that we try to do all the time.
Great. So we are coming to the end of our time with you, Ms. Zack. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the students that will be watching this, or anything we didn't get to?
I mean, I would say that, you live in one of the most exciting states when it comes to politics. I mean, it's a place where people pay attention to it nationally. And that the state tries to, I think more and more young people are looking to get involved because they want to see changes at very local levels. And I think that's only for the better. So I hope we see younger, a younger group of people coming through like politics and wanting, and I hope people get inspired to run too. Which I once had a boss who used to say to me, "You should run," and I was like, I don't want to do that, because it's a very difficult job, especially with social media. Like there's no kind of hiding what people think of you. So I hope people, feel inspired to get involved in their communities, work with their local elected officials, and, maybe someday they run too. And I think that's one great thing about government affairs, is that I meet a lot of people who start off as like, staffers for elected officials, and then they wind up, that person is term limited out, so they wind up running for their seat, and that's their job. I think that's pretty great. That those are the type of jobs that have tracks like that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
You don't have to be in New York City for it to be exciting. Yeah. It can be anywhere.
Even Greenville, New York.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Ms. Zack. We truly appreciate it.
It was so great to talk to both of you. Jaden, it was so good to meet you. If anyone ever wants to reach out, I'd be happy to talk.